Somewhere beneath your feet right now, deep below the roads, the buildings, the noise, China is carving out a second world. Not a tunnel, not a metro line, a city. A full, functioning, breathing city buried underground and stretching for 10,000 kilometers. 10,000 kilometers, that's wider than the entire United States, coast to coast. It's longer than the Great Wall of China. It's a distance so vast that if you tried to walk it, it would take you 3.5 years without a single day of rest. And here's the part that will genuinely unsettle you. This isn't a plan. It isn't a concept drawing on some government whiteboard. It's already being built, right now, today. While you're watching this video, thousands of workers, hundreds of machines, and one of the most ambitious engineering programs in human history are tunneling deeper and deeper beneath Chinese cities, and the world above has almost no idea it's happening. America has no answer for this. Europe doesn't either. What China is doing underground right now has no parallel anywhere on Earth, and by the time most governments even begin to understand what's been built, China will already be living in it. To understand why China went underground, you first have to understand the crisis happening above ground. China is home to more than 1.4 billion people. Of those, over 1 billion now live in cities. Think about that number for a second. 1 billion people crammed into urban areas, and the cities are running out of room. Not slowly running out of room, desperately, urgently, dangerously running out of room. By 2035, China's urban population is expected to hit 1.1 billion. That means China needs to house, move, feed, and power more new city dwellers in the next decade than the entire current population of the United States, twice over. And it needs to do this in cities that are already at breaking point. You can't just build more skyscrapers. You can't just add more highways. The surface is saturated. The sky is full. Traffic in Beijing regularly locks down for hours. The air quality in major Chinese industrial cities spent years being measured not in parts per million, but in levels that made outdoor exercise a medical hazard. Shanghai floods every monsoon season because there's nowhere left for the water to go. The ground itself is sinking in places, literally subsiding under its own weight because of how densely everything above it has been packed. Chinese urban planners stared at this problem for years, decades actually. They built upward as far as physics and economics allowed. They expanded outward, swallowing farmland, forests, and smaller towns into the ever-growing edges of megacities. They built some of the most ambitious surface infrastructure in human history, and it still wasn't enough. And then, somewhere around 2015, they stopped looking up for solutions. They started looking down. The project doesn't have one single official name. It's referred to in different government documents as the Underground City Network, the Sponge City Underground Expansion, and most recently as Deep Underground Space Development. But whatever you call it, the scale of what's happening beneath Chinese soil right now is almost impossible to fully comprehend. The plan works on 3 levels, literally. 3 distinct layers of underground development, each one sitting below the last, each one serving a completely different function, and each one more extraordinary than the one above it. The first layer, sitting just 10 to 15 meters below street level, is where daily life moves. Shopping malls, food courts, parks, yes, actual parks, with artificial lighting systems so advanced they mimic the full spectrum of natural sunlight, including the ultraviolet wavelengths that keep plants alive and give human skin its vitamin D. Pedestrian walkways that connect entire city districts without a single car in sight. Bike lanes, gyms, libraries. This layer already exists in fragments across Chinese cities today. In Zhengzhou, there's an underground pedestrian street nearly 4 kilometers long, lined with stores and restaurants, bustling with foot traffic, completely invisible from the surface. In Wuhan, underground commercial zones serve hundreds of thousands of people every single day. In Shanghai and Chengdu, the underground retail and transit networks have already merged into something that genuinely deserves to be called a parallel city. The second layer goes deeper. 15 to 50 meters down. This is pure infrastructure, the arteries and veins of the underground city, high-speed freight tunnels that move goods across entire metro areas without ever touching a surface road, cutting delivery times in half and removing thousands of trucks from city streets. And then there are the utility corridors, perhaps the single most important thing China has built that almost nobody outside of engineering circles talks about. These are massive, walk-in tunnels, wide enough to drive a small vehicle through, that house water pipes, electricity cables, internet infrastructure, gas lines, and sewage systems all bundled together in one organized, accessible, repairable space. No more digging up roads every time a pipe bursts. No more city blocks paralyzed for weeks because a cable needs replacing. Everything is accessible, everything is organized, everything is built to last 100 years. China has already constructed over 8,000 kilometers of these utility corridors. The rest of the world combined hasn't built half that number. And then there's the third layer, the deepest one, sitting 50 meters or more beneath the surface. And this is where things stop being impressive and start being genuinely awe-inspiring. China is drilling enormous deep rock caverns, carved directly into solid bedrock, designed to survive any disaster that would flatten everything above them. Earthquake, flood, military strike, these are nuclear-grade civil defense shelters, large enough to house entire urban populations in an emergency. Emergency data centers that would keep government systems running even if the surface city was completely destroyed. Underground reservoirs capable of storing hundreds of millions of cubic meters of floodwater, absorbing the kinds of deluges that have devastated Chinese cities in recent years and releasing the water back safely under control. In Beijing alone, the Deep Underground Master Plan involves excavating caverns large enough to shelter the entire metropolitan population if the surface became uninhabitable. This isn't dystopian science fiction. This is written in publicly available city planning documents, approved by the Chinese government and being actively funded and constructed right now. None of this would be physically possible without one of the most remarkable machines ever engineered, the modern tunnel boring machine, and in particular, the Chinese version of it, which has quietly become the best in the world. China now operates more tunnel boring machines than every other country on the planet put together. Not slightly more, vastly more. These aren't the slow, grinding drilling machines of the last century. The newest generation of Chinese TBMs are mechanical masterpieces. Some of them are bigger than a 5-story building. They weigh more than 10,000 tons. And they don't just drill. They drill, reinforce the tunnel walls with precast concrete segments, remove the excavated rock, and completely seal the finished tunnel section behind them, all in one continuous operation, running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, without stopping, without rest. The most advanced model, developed entirely by Chinese engineers without foreign assistance, is called the Jinghua, Capital Glory. It can tunnel through the hardest bedrock on Earth, granite, quartzite, compressed limestone, at a sustained rate of up to 35 meters per day. For context, the machines used to dig London's Crossrail project, one of the most celebrated infrastructure achievements in recent British history, averaged just 15 meters per day through far softer ground. China didn't start with this technology. They bought tunnel boring machines from Germany, from Japan, from American manufacturers. They paid billions in licensing fees and import costs for the tools they needed to build their own country. Then, in 2008, the government decided enough was enough. A national research program was launched with one clear objective: build a better machine than anyone else on Earth. By 2018, they had done exactly that. Today, Chinese-made tunnel boring machines are being exported to infrastructure projects across Europe, the Middle East, and Southeast Asia. The countries that once sold China the tools are now buying them back. The student became the teacher, and the classroom is buried 50 meters underground. Now let's talk about America, because the comparison is genuinely uncomfortable. New York City subway, the largest transit system in the United States, was built mostly between 1900 and 1940. Today, over 100 years later, it still runs on much of that same infrastructure. Its signal systems in some sections still use relay technology originally designed in the 1930s. In 2023, the average speed of a New York City subway train was measurably slower than it was in 1950. Not the same, slower. America's flagship city is moving its people underground at a pace it has been losing ground on for 70 years. The Second Avenue subway expansion, a single additional line, just 3.5 kilometers of new track, spent over 100 years in planning stages, burned through $4.5 billion, and is still only partially complete. 3.5 kilometers. China tunnels more of that underground on an average Tuesday. America's problem is not intelligence. It is not technology. It is not even money. The United States has more than enough of all three. The problem is the space between a decision and its execution, the permits that take 5 years,
The legal challenges that halt construction for a decade, the environmental impact reviews that outlast the careers of the engineers who filed them, the political cycles that cancel what the last administration approved. China decided what it was going to build, secured the land, moved the people if necessary, and started drilling. That gap between the decision and the first machine in the ground is measured in weeks in China and in decades in America. And that gap is exactly where a 10,000-kilometer head start was quietly born. But step back from the politics and the competition for a moment, because there's a bigger reason this matters, a reason that goes beyond national pride and engineering records. The cities that survive the next 50 years will not be the ones with the tallest buildings or the most crowded streets. They will be the ones that had the vision to build below the surface, before the surface became unlivable. Climate change is already reshaping what cities can and cannot withstand. Heat events that once happened once a decade are now annual. Flooding that once threatened coastal cities is creeping inland. The infrastructure that kept 20th century cities running was built for a climate that no longer exists. China saw this coming, and while the rest of the world was still arguing about what to do above ground, China quietly went beneath it and started building the city that comes after the city we know. There is a world beneath the world. China is already living in it.